Welcome to AI Almighty, the podcast where Christians talk about AI, its future, and what Christianity has to do with it. So, Mariah, this week, there was a discussion I saw about a researcher. She's a woman who's been working on large language models for a long time. She's written papers about it, and what she was talking about was adding common sense to AI. She said she used to write papers and she actually put the word common sense in there. And the people that would be peer reviewing her paper and stuff would just say, find another way to say it. Don't recommend using the word common sense. And the people started discussing a little bit, what common sense was. And so my question to you is today, if you were going to train an AI model and give it common sense, which just like, as I say it, seems like everybody should agree with it. What is common sense?
What is common sense? Wow. Well, I think we all know that it's kind of ironic because it's not so common. There's lots of people without common sense. I would say that it comes down to reasoning, deductive and inductive reasoning. The ability to problem solve, I think would be common sense. But in a way, I don't think there is a great way to define common sense. It's very broad. And what's common sense for one culture is not common sense for another culture. So the AI in the Eastern hemisphere is going to its common sense will look different from the Western culture's hemisphere.
Yeah, one thing that was suggested I thought was interesting was common sense would be something like, if you're going to record a podcast, you want a quiet room.
Right.
So that's common sense. Now, obviously, there's people in different parts of the world that have never thought about or recorded or anything like that. Maybe that's not common sense to them. But, for the most part, that's probably common sense that you want a quiet room when you record a podcast. But in some ways, there's not a ton of reasoning that would have to be done there necessarily. You just kind of know, right? You just sort of know that that's the way it should be. And so, what kind of things would we want to put in there? Because it gets tricky, and some things that might be tricky. I think it used to be common sense that women were not as good at math as men were. That was totally common sense. 50 years ago, everybody would have agreed with that. And maybe there's some study demonstrating that's true today. I don't think that's actually true, but if it were, nobody would probably just grant that as common sense anymore.
Right.
You would need some serious hard data to demonstrate that that's true. So giving something common sense, seems a little bit harder than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it seems like a good idea in the beginning, and it even sounds really good, but when you get down to the logistics of how you would do it and what common sense actually is, one person's common sense may not be the same as somebody else's. So I think it actually is pretty difficult. Do you know what type of common sense she was talking about?
Well, she talked about it in very, very basic terms, knowing that a chair was something you sat in, or a table wasn't something that you would normally use as a chair, or just something that is actually very common. Because when these large language models mess up, she was talking about things a child would know.
Right.
A kid would even know you don't do that.
Right. Okay.
And so she was talking about a common sense pretty common. If a 10-year-old would know, then you wouldn't do that.
So does AI not have common sense now? Because I thought that was kind of the thing about ChatGPT. You can say write me a story like this, and then it just kind of works from the common sense that's already on the internet.
Well, you're making a good point, because she did a TED Talk, and even some of the things that she noticed where it didn't have common sense, she worked with it a long time. She did a lot of tests, chatting with her or whatever, and eventually got, found these mistakes. I noticed even in the comments that some of the things that she said messed up are already fixed. So therefore, maybe this isn't too much to worry about, and it already has common sense. And let's just say that it does. Let's just say, like, why was she that worried about it? She's just behind. She was thinking about large language models a year ago, and now it's just so far advanced. The people training these models don't even care about it because it's just so smart. Thinking about needing to tell it to have a quiet room during a podcast is trivial for it now, and it's not going to make these mistakes. One thing I was thinking about would be something like, I would say it's common sense, or maybe would I say it's common sense to be like, you want to treat people well?
I don't know. I don't think that. I think it's hard to call morals and manners common sense. You would think that they should be common sense, but I don't know. I think that's a tough one to call.
And if you wanted to train these morals, or what you and I might consider common sense morals that you and I probably don't really discuss, that we shouldn't lie to each other,
right?
And we need to tell each other the truth and stuff. How would we train that in the model? So, I know how logistically you could train it. So they train on these large data sets, huge data sets with tons of compute. But then sometimes they refine it by using a smaller data set to refine it, to make it seem, that way there's no weird grammar or anything like that. They use a smaller thing. So you could do that, have this huge large language model, then train it on a smaller set of, things to try to hone it in. Would you train it on the Bible?
Train it on the Bible, or
would you
the Bible
so
it can take?
It obviously can read the Bible. It's already read the Bible.
Oh,
That's not the question. But would you say when you're considering morals or whatever, you should lean on what the Bible says?
So if we do that, then it's only ethical to upload all the other ones. The Buddhist scriptures, the Quran.
That's what OpenAI should do. They should lean Christian. But if we were to say we could do it, you and I, or just for us, for us, or we wanted our kids to use it or something like that. Totally could. Because I actually think that'd be really hard, because theology just gets to be so complicated. Would this ChatGPT that created suddenly think that we should be remembering the Sabbath, keep it holy, and it'd be wrong to work on Sundays? Or mow your lawn on Sundays, let's say, which I think some people wouldn't mow their lawn on Sundays, but a lot of Christianity would mow their lawn on Sundays. Usually we take the Sabbath as a principle that you should take one day off a week and have a day of rest or whatever. But we no longer strictly, say...
don't fix food.
Don't fix food on Sundays. Prefix it on Saturdays so you don't do it or whatever. Waiters and waitresses. Sometimes even the people that kind of adhere to the Sunday thing will go to a restaurant in which a waiter or waitress serves them, and they're sort of causing them to work on Sundays or whatever. So we don't strictly adhere to that, and certainly not in the way the Old Testament did. But if ChatGPT read the Old Testament, whose theology would it have?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. That would be hard, because all the theologies are a little bit different. Some of them quite more than others. I think it would be cool if you could almost use it as a filter and be give me the Old Testament according to a Baptist point of view or a Catholic point of view. Because, if you do it from a Catholic, then Genesis 1 through 12 are all going to be figurative. They're all going to be kind of fake. So that would be... And
Peter would be a the Pope is a continuation of Peter.
And they have the extra
and they're the only ones that think that.
They have the Maccabees, stuff like that, so they would plug those in. So I think it would be really cool if you could use it as a filter and be I want all my information seen through this, or this, but also have the option to go back and look at it kind of from a global point of view, and then be I want it with all of them. If you did choose to have it with all, it would be interesting to see what AI chose as the truth or the way.
Well, I have used ChatGPT with theology stuff, and I would kind of argue it could sort of do that already. If I asked ChatGPT what the Baptists think about whatever, it will know.
Yeah.
And if I said, what about the Southern Baptists, or how maybe I should go on a deeper dive on this. It already can kind of tell you, because it doesn't care.
So then what you're saying is if we were asking it about morals, then which one would we listen to? Or like, what is your question exactly?
Yeah, so I mean, you say, does chat, we talk about the morals of ChatGPT, it's common sense, things it should obviously do. Well, depending on one Christian you're talking to, it's obviously moral to not mow the lawn on Sundays.
Right.
But to others, it's obviously you can mow your lawn on Sundays.
So the question then is like, where does ChatGPT draw the line?
Yeah, or do we just say, no, we want ChatGPT to be completely secular, meaning do we want it to just be completely secular? Pretending we can make our own models, right? We don't even want a Christian model. We want a completely secular model that just answers the question. And so if I say, is it okay to mow my lawn on Sundays according to Christianity? We just want it to say, well, depends on which one you ask. And these say yes and these say no. I mean, because that's like a secular view, because non-Christians can study Christian theology and totally explain it to you.
Right.
That not like they're incapable
They
of...
have the knowledge.
They have the knowledge. And so do we want ChatGPT to be that? So therefore, if, usually kids is a good example, because maybe you and I are saying, well, adults, we should be able to, listen to a lot of things. But with kids, we often super filter their content, like big time, right? Like your parents probably didn't let you watch certain movies or TV or whatever. Never. So, and each parent to a different degree, but every parent doesn't.
Right.
There's probably very few parents, even of people that aren't particularly Christian or religious of any kind, that don't filter to a degree, right?
To a degree, yeah.
So are we just kind of landing on there should just be no filter no matter who's popping on it? Or because, we just want it to just spit out facts or whatever and try to choose, obviously when you say spit out facts, it can't spit out every fact. I mean, if we just said, name all the views of baptism, there might be like hundreds. I mean, do you want a list of 100? Probably not. So, what do we think? Are we just saying we want it to be secular?
Well, okay, I do think that it would be interesting to ask, if you ask them, according to ChatGPT, what is the most logical Christian theology? I think that would be really interesting. Just because a lot of these theologies, they don't logically follow.
We don't think they logically follow, maybe. But, obviously the people that believe them, especially long-established ones that have theologians, they think they logically follow, right?
Some don't. I know, when I talk to, Catholic theology people, it's always just well, you just have to have faith. And it's they don't really believe in the logic side at all. Whereas, Proverbs says that God is the beginning of knowledge and wisdom. So, it has to have some order, some logic, because, that's who God is, right? So, not that I'm saying ChatGPT would obviously, be this is a good theology and this is bad and you should trust it according to the logic of the computer. But I think it would be kind of interesting. I don't think we should completely secularize it. I think all the information should be there. I think we can kind of already filter it. So maybe it's fine the way it is, but a Christian option would be nice.
Yeah, because it's difficult to say because, I knew a Catholic professor and I don't think he would agree that his understanding of the different way he believes is not logical. I think he totally would say that it's logical. We could disagree with him, obviously, but I don't think he would accept that. So if I asked ChatGPT what's logical, I think the way it would be now would be diplomatic. It would just say something like, depends on who you ask, right? I don't think it would commit. It wouldn't say, well, obviously, the Baptists are right, and what they say is super smart, and the Presbyterians are the ones that are really out to lunch.
Yeah.
I don't think it would say that. But if I asked it is it okay to do, what a controversial issue, what about homosexuality? Is that okay? Or what about, bestiality? Is it going to say definitely wrong, definitely right? Or is it, maybe it's just going to give a diplomatic answer?
Honestly, though, at this point, I don't think people should be, if they have moral concerns like that, they should just be reading their Bible. I don't think they should rely on artificial intelligence to tell them that. Yeah,
so maybe we're just saying that at this point at ChatGPT, if you want to know what the different people believe about bestiality, that's fine. And
it's a good place to start, but ultimately, if you're making moral decisions from yourself, that's got to come from the Bible.
So do we think that ChatGPT won't have much influence on morals and common sense?
Oof. No, not necessarily, because people just go to the computer, they type in stuff, and then they just believe it. And they don't know where it comes from, most people. They don't check the sources, they don't check the statistics, or they just listen to super skewed statistics, things that are like reportedly, by the own company or stuff like that. So I think it could be bad because then ultimately who makes the morals? Whoever makes the moral code for AI is acting kind of as God. Like if you think about it.
Yeah, but at some point in history, the church had an incredible amount of power. Like owned a ton of land.
Right.
This was some form of the Catholic Church or whatever version they were currently running. But did people suddenly under them, because the morals were really laid out clearly, everybody followed those morals? I'm not sure that is necessarily true. Because if ChatGPT did somehow provide perfect Christian morals, does that mean we think everybody would follow those morals?
No. Because it's human nature to rebel.
Right.
It's kind of like in our DNA. I think ChatGPT would pick more of the universal morals that, most cultural... most cultures always think it's wrong to murder, to steal, to lie. Like, there are cultural things, to go back on your word, to sleep with somebody's spouse. Like, most cultures see those as inherently wrong, for whatever reason. So I think it would lay those out pretty easy. But the one that I don't think it would ever get is the one that talks about, like, loving your neighbor as yourself. I don't think it will ever get that one, just because there's so much out there about, like, yourself. Like, be yourself, self-care, focus on yourself, do what's good for yourself, cut out toxic people. And so I really think it will miss the whole point of love.
How would we, you talked about ChatGPT possibly becoming our moral overlords, or, taking the place of God or something like that. How would we demonstrate, what evidence would we see of that? Like, what would we see in the future over the next years that would be like, yes, that's happening? Or saying like, no, we were guessing the future. The future's hard to guess. No one guesses the future right. It's, we just weren't quite right. What evidence would we be able to kind of see for ourselves that'd be like, no, that's happening. The ChatGPT is becoming super influential on morals.
Right now, I think the most influential thing on morals right now are other people. Like on TikTok, Reels, like you watch them, you see what they're doing. So if it ever got to a point, I don't know if you could ever top that, like other people's influence. But if it ever got to the point where like AI is in people's homes, like telling them what to do, like if you have an argument with your sister and then you go to the AI like it's a counselor and you're like, so-and-so thinks this, this, and this, and they're like, oh, well, this is the way to handle that, then that could be crazy.
And so maybe if people started using it as a counselor, which, I don't think people are not doing it majorly that way now. Not that I'm aware of, or any kind of mass, then maybe it would have a major influence.
And that's scary too, because it's gonna only, like, if I had an argument with my sister and I was like, she's a narcissist and she only cares about herself, and then like he responds, annihilate her.
Right.
Like that's kind of scary. But I don't know. I can also see it being used as like a judge, like in a jury. Like each side uploads their information, their evidence, the computer runs through it.
And it might actually be a better judge than a counselor, because if in the judge everybody gets to, provide the information that they have. But the problem with being a counselor is when someone comes to you for counseling, there's like a 90% chance they're lying. Like
99.
Like when they talk about how stupid their sister is, they're almost totally twisting everything. And if you bring both the sisters in and the other one starts talking, the first one that made it sound like the other one was the demon or whatever, you realize like, oh, okay, this was a real short thing. Like, I remember one pastor telling me about, he said this couple came in and they were fighting. Well, eventually, after long enough, I don't know if it was multiple counseling session, but it took a long time, that meant throwing knives at each other
Oh, no.
in the kitchen. So, these things,
Right.
you don't get the truth in counseling very well, especially not the first time around for the most part.
And AI, I mean, it could go a step farther and it could scan people's social media. It could scan like violent keywords that they've been known to send back and forth, and like it could get a pretty good idea of who this person is.
If you gave it full access to everything on the internet and it was smart enough to just go like follow everything, and then if it was really smart enough to just go and like I'm going to listen to every microphone that ever picked this person up and I can listen to all their audio instantly,
it would have a verdict very quick.
It could, yeah. Well, in the judge thing I could see it being good at. The counseling thing's harder. I mean, because the counseling thing is hard in the sense that you have to know that when the person tells you the problem that they have, that might not be the problem.
Yeah. No,
and the problem that they have,
them.
yeah, and the problem that they have, they may not know. They're just like unaware that the reason they act this way is because of this other thing, and they have not put two and two together.
Right.
That the reason their behavior is this way is because of some other thing. It's just like when the person comes into work that day and they're super grouchy, and you think that they're mad at you, and they're just mad at their spouse or whatever, right? And they may not even be realizing that how grouchy they are, and so on and so forth. So yeah, counseling might be trickier, than I think it is. I mean, it'll be a great listener, but I don't know about how much an advice giver it'll be. Well, it's been an interesting thing, common sense, morals, AI. I mean, I'm just not sure what to say about it. The more we talk about it, the more I lean towards not minding it being just completely secular and just being very diplomatic about everything. Well, what's the most logical, Christian denomination? Well, lots of people think lots of different things.
Right.
I'm going to give you a list of the 10 most popular based on how many people are in each one. And if you say, well, I want more than that, well, they could give you 20. And if you want more than that, it could give you 30. And so maybe some of that is okay. And maybe some of our traditional filters of just, no swearing or, sexual content for kids or maybe more than just kids is maybe some of those traditional filters are good enough. And when you start getting into having it try to suggest more specific morals to based on denomination or theological system, maybe it's just fraught. Maybe that's just a mistake, to try to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, like it could. I think it should just be like an extension. Like you can if you want, or like you can buy it extra, but like for the mass of people, maybe just keep it global.
Yeah, and you buy it extra, and if you want to use that for your kids and young kids especially, or I would be like you said last time. You just tend to not let your kids use it until later anyway. So maybe maybe that's what'll happen.
But I think it could be cool for like pastors and theologians though, or like Sunday school people who like are really into like studying, because you could get so many different points of view.
I've already used it for that kind of thing. It's very good. I mean, the thing that I don't like about it, so if you would say, so I've typed in like on the passage I'm doing, write a sermon, what would a sermon be on this passage? And it'll give me 5 main points. And what I don't like about it is they're very general. Right. Oh, it's always faith, always grace, which are fine. And I'm not saying I wouldn't bring some of those main points out, but it's usually pretty steady. But then if I'm like, ask a specific question, or what denomination believes about this, or, what are the arguments for this or that and the other thing. I always re-look it up because I don't trust ChatGPT, but I'm always like, it's right. So I haven't actually got it wrong yet. So, it hasn't gotten, led me astray yet. One time I thought it was dead wrong, and I spent like 20 minutes.
What was it about?
It was about whether we knew for sure who certain people were. A list of people is mentioned, and it was like, here they are, here's their names, and this is where they're from. And I thought, there's no way it made this up. We don't know these people. I didn't recognize these names. Totally, it was right.
Wow, they were all in the Bible?
They were all in the Bible, and it pulled it from the Bible. I thought it had maybe pulled it from like Catholic, tradition or something like that, but no, it was right. So
wow, yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Well, we better sign off for today. Good talking to you. Thanks for joining us again next time for Almighty AI, and we will see you next week.